And welcome back to the Argyle CFO Summit. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Chris Ortega, Chief Executive Officer at Fresh FP&A. We are excited to have Chris with us for a keynote titled, The CFO's Guide to Empathy. Welcome, Chris, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you, Argyle, for the awesome opportunity. And happy Tuesday to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm in McCoursville, Indiana. And I don't know about you, but this weather is like all over the place. Hopefully, springtime is coming and it starts to get warm out there. So really excited for this presentation today. As Brittany mentioned, I'll be talking to everybody today, giving the CFO's guide to empathy, which I think is really important. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so tell everybody a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a diehard Hoosier fan, so go Hoosiers. And as Brittany mentioned, I'm the CEO of Fresh FP&A. And basically what Fresh FP&A does is we provide fractional CFO and advisory services to high growth businesses. Those high growth businesses being software, technology, retail, e-commerce, pharma, and renewable companies. I've spent most of my professional career in accounting, finance, FP&A, and financial leaderships, primarily in high growth businesses. And most recently, I worked at an international marketing platform company, built that all the way up. The Americas operations came in, built it from scratch, first finance hire, built out the Americas operations, and then got that through to exit to SAP. And then I stayed over for a year to help with the post-merger integration of the two different companies. And then I found myself at this fork in the road. I said, you know what? I know what it takes to build and shape and transform a finance organization. I've been there. I've done that. I know all the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And the second thing is I felt like there needed to be a fresh perspective brought to finance. So a little over a year ago, I started Fresh FP&A. And like I said, I've spent over most of my career. I started off in public accounting. Shout out, drop in the chat all my former Big Four people. I will show you guys my Ernst & Young branding, but now I'm branded with my Fresh FP&A on my right arm. But another unique, interesting fact about myself as well, too, I used to be an amateur boxer. I fought competitively for about 5 years. And my record was 42-4. So I had 46 amateur fights. And I like to tell everybody a great story about fighting in the Golden Gloves and how I can get through this and a great story about it. So I was in the semifinals of the Golden Gloves, and the Golden Gloves, for anybody that doesn't know, the Golden Gloves is the largest amateur boxing tournament in the United States. So I was in the semifinals. I'm coming out, all my friends, family, network, people that I worked with, work colleagues, NBA friends that I went to school with, they're all at my fight. And I'm in the first like 10 seconds of the first round. The bell rings and I'm throwing out a lazy jab to see what the boxer's gonna do. And I threw out one of these lazy jabs and he slips underneath it. And when you throw out a lazy jab, like your whole like liver section is exposed. So as I did that and he rolled under, I got hit with the most vicious liver shot I ever got hit in my life with. And for anybody that doesn't know, when you get hit in your liver, basically your body installs updates, right? So like, you know, when your computer just randomly installs updates and restarts, that's what my body did in the first 15 seconds of this fight. And I end up losing the match. I didn't make it to the finals, but the whole goal of that story was there never be anything in accounting, finance, FP&A, or CFO leadership that I'll ever face that's more challenging than standing in that Golden Gloves first round and not pooping myself in front of everybody. So that is probably my claim to fame. And I was like, hey, if I can get through this, like, ASC 606 and AS 842 and audit committees, like this isn't going to be as challenging as that. So that's a little fun fact about myself. Okay, so the learning objectives for today is one of the most important things is I think with CFOs being so involved in the people aspect of the business, I want to make sure that I give you a framework that you can go implement inside of your organization to get down to have an empathetic, data-driven decision-making mindset. So I want to give you a great framework around that. Determine like why it's important and then like what's in it for you to bring empathy to the office of the CFO, and then for you to create a plan, right? So like one thing I'm always like really conscious of and I think is important is to give you actionable things that you can take away from this presentation today. So like you don't need IT, you don't need a CPA exam course, you don't need all these different things. Like here are actionable things and practical strategies that you can go implement right now. So that's the third point as well too. And if I did a great job delivering on all three of these, so those are the objectives and what we're going to go through here today, and what the goal of the conversation is, and some key points I want to make sure everybody gathers from it. Okay, so the first thing is, what is empathy, right? And a lot of times, don't get this confused with like sympathy, right? I think a lot of times, like it's very important for CFOs to have an empathetic view. Like one of the most important things going on right now is like, you constantly look on LinkedIn, you constantly look at the news. There's this massive amount of like, people getting laid off or like reductions happening or and I think one of the most important things that I gathered away from the pandemic, even before the pandemic, was that the CFO role and the finance organization in and of itself has such a vital impact around the people aspect, right? And one of the biggest like gaps that a lot of CFOs and traditional finance leaders have is we're so quantitatively focused, right? Like we want to quantify the ROI, we want to see the numbers, we want to trace and agree the supporting documentation, we want to trust but verify, right? We come with the mentality of being very quantifiable and very like measured in our approach, right? But one of the most important things that we need from the business is like to get comfortable with the qualitative side of the business, right? One of the, I think the most important things for CFOs to do in the future is to get comfortable with the warm and fuzzies of your organization, right? Like, for example, one of the most important metrics that I want to give to everybody that you should be measuring inside your organization, cost of attrition, right? And why that is so important, right? When you look at talent, right, which is another like macro people element that is happening right now across a lot of different teams, and not because sales team, marketing team, it's enterprise wide. This talent demand, we have to make sure that we're looking at that cost of attrition of leaving the talent, right? And typically, where I see and where I advise clients on is like when you're looking at individual contributors, you're looking at maybe like 1 to 3x of what their salaries are going to be, right? That's the cost of that talent leaving your organization. That's the cost of attrition, right? Another element is like once you get into directors, VP, CFOs, you're looking at 3 to 5x the cost of their salary of impact that that's going to have to the business, right? And that's a common qualitative factor that I think a lot of CFOs are just like, hey, no, that's a people operation size. That's HR. Like that's their wheelhouse for them to measure. So I think that's like one key insight in this empathetic view, right? So the difference between empathy and sympathy, right? Empathy is, hey, like I appreciate your viewpoint, right? Being sympathetic is saying, say somebody has a problem, right? And you're like, oh, I'm so sorry that that happened to you, right? Like that's sympathy. An empathetic view is saying, hey, I see that that happened. That's unfortunate. How can I help and support you as you go through this, right? And a lot of different times, like taking that viewpoint of like trying to see the world through somebody else's eyes, right? Like not saying, hey, I see you're going through this. And I think a common phrase that people see a lot is like, hey, I've never been through that before, but I can see how that makes you feel. Like that's not empathy, right? Meeting people where they are, understanding their feelings, right? Seeing their viewpoint and having taken a step back as a CFO to like truly listen and not listen to provide solutions to the problem, frustration, or challenge that they're having, but listening to understand, right? Understand where they're coming from, what their feelings are. Like one of the most important CFO hats CFOs of the future need to put on is that chief feelings officer, right? Getting back to what I mentioned earlier about being comfortable with the warm and fuzzies, right? Like you got to get comfortable with that. You got to get it comfortable with employee engagement and cost of attrition and state interviews, like, and being part of the interviewing process for, senior level executives. We have to get ourselves being back inside of that people element of the organization. And it all starts with that empathetic viewpoint. So that's just one thing I wanted to make sure we understood the difference of. And that's a superpower for CFOs of the future. Okay, so why is empathy important? So we know what it is, and you're sitting there, Chris, like, why is this important for me, like, to be here? It really gets down to the 4 power C's that I like to talk about, right? When you look at the office of the CFO, I look at it in 3 different like time horizons, right? The first time horizon that we had was everything before the pandemic, right? Like our value proposition was we got the numbers to you, we were, taking care of the audits, we were doing the month-end close, we made sure every leader got their budget to variance actual analysis. Like that was the value of what the finance organization was, right? Then during the pandemic is that second phase, right? And when the pandemic happened, you had a catalyst change. It was like a monumental change in the office of the CFO. And what that change sparked was you had a lot of chief sales officers, you had a lot of chief revenue officers, you had a lot of chief marketing officers. During that time of uncertainty, challenge, and chaos and complexity, they took a step back and they were like, look, this is uncharted territory for us. Like, I don't know how sales are going to look. And those CFOs that stepped up, right? That stepped up to carry businesses through that challenge, to navigate that adversity, and to continue to come out being a great communicator, collaborator, and some of these power C's. What that's done in that phase 2 for the business demand and the office of the CFO is set a new baseline, right? It set the baseline higher of what the business expects out of the office of the CFO. Gone is that phase 1 where the business expects you to get the numbers and, to be the scorekeeper mentality we had. In that second phase, we set the baseline of like, yeah, we can be great collaborators, right? We can build connection inside the organization. We care about our employees, right? And we can communicate and turn complexity into clarity and turn pain into productivity for the business, right? Now, as we enter this phase 3, so we looked at those different phases, which is post-pandemic. Now that baseline is set in the business is like, no, like I know you can keep score. I know you know ASC 606. I know you know all these things, but how can you partner with me? How can you be a great collab? How can you build a collaborative finance organization that is inside the business, right? How do you build connection from, hey, I'm in marketing or I'm in operations or I'm in sales? How do you build that connection to the bottom line results within that functional organization, but even broader of the organization as a whole, right? And I think probably out of these 4, the most important superpower that CFOs need to be in the future, we need to be great communicators, right? Trade out the calculator, be a great communicator, right? We got to speak the business's language. You'd be surprised how many CFOs. So I just got back from a finance conference, and it was surprising to me when I would ask CFOs, I'm like, hey, tell me about your business. Like, tell me your ideal customer profile, your ICP. Tell me a little bit about your go-to-market strategy. Tell me about your customer acquisition costs and how you look at that, right? Tell me about opportunities that you see in the top line, either bookings or revenue growth of your business. And I'm asking them these questions and they're just like, Chris, like, we make sure we get the numbers out to the CEO on time, and we make sure that sales isn't going over the travel budget, or they couldn't tell me their business model. Like they couldn't articulate clearly, right, what their business model was. So I think having these, thinking about these for the CFO of the future, these are the new baselines. And also as well too, like you look at the prevalence of technology right now, right? You look at ChatGPT, you look at Bart, you look at GPT-4, you look at all the different AI plugin tools that are integrated with that, right? There's a lot of ability to take that low value, that quantitative, that calculator mindset and value proposition, and leverage AI, machine learning, prescriptive and predictive analytics to position us to higher value, right? Because I don't know about you, but in the office of the CFO, when revenue's going great, right? Like you hire more salespeople, you hire more marketing people. We don't get that luxury in finance, right? Like you could be growing triple. I've led businesses and we're growing triple digit year over year, and I'm having the hardest time to get that high potential headcount requisition that I want. So we've got to make sure that we're harnessing these 4 C's, but also leveraging technology as well too. So that's why this empathy is important for CFOs. Okay, so one of the learning objectives, I want to give you a decision-making framework. So this is one thing that you can take away, that you can start having an empathetic, data-driven decision-making framework inside your organization. And it's what I call, it's the decision cycle plus people, right? So going back to my public accounting days, right? I remember when I first started in my career a long, long time ago. Yes, people, I'm older than what you think I am. You're like, oh, he's talking about a long time ago. Yes, I'm older than what you realize. But when I was in Ernst & Young, I remember the Sarbanes-Oxley like walkthroughs and test of controls, right? And I remember talking with the controllers and the AP clerks and the collections people and the fixed asset person and the GL account. I remember how all these people and all this connection were driving the processes, right? And then that process then turned into data. Data is then consumed into information, which is then shared through knowledge to ultimately make a business decision, right? And typically, right, like what you want to have is like start with the people. If there's one key highlight that you take away from my presentation, and you're a CFO, you're a VP of finance, you're a manager of finance, you're a leader, or you're aspiring to be one of those people, the most important place to start any financial transformation, any improvement in value and upskilling our value proposition, the people. People are everything. And this framework is like when you understand that people, when you take that empathetic view, right? You're looking at that AP clerk and you're like, hey, like, help me understand what are some pains, some frustrations, some opportunities that you see, right? One of the best questions that you could take away right now that you could go ask like your team that gets them thinking about this is, what are the pains and opportunities and challenges that you see in our finance organization? And how, as a CFO, can I help solve some of those, right? Like that's one of the biggest things right now. If talent is motivated by impact, right? No, you can't just sign off signing bonuses and give these crazy salaries, right? Like that's still important. But when you're looking at salary being the same, but I have a CFO that takes an empathetic view to our finance organization and takes an empathetic view to our organization as a whole, and takes an empathetic view to our environment, social, and governance ESG initiatives, that is a key differentiator. So this framework helps you think about how in the different elements of the finance organization, right, can I understand the people? Because those people are driving process. That process is turned into data, data into information, information shared through knowledge to ultimately make a business decision. So this is that empathetic, data-driven decision-making framework that you could go implement immediately to start thinking about how you're making decisions in your organization and where you need to start. And, you know, as I talked about before, one of the as in leading Fresh FP&A, right? Like I get the opportunity. I have a global team. We have global operations. We take on clients not only in Americas but across the globe. One of the most important things that I've learned in leading Fresh FP&A, but also in my professional career, is one of the biggest superpowers as a leader, as an empathetic leader, as a servant leader, is listening. But listening to the point of understanding, not to the point of solutions, right? And I'll be honest with everybody, right? I'll be vulnerable. When I elevated and moved up in my career to a people leader, I completely failed at this. I failed miserably. I would listen to my team, but I wasn't listening to understand, right? I wasn't listening to connect. I wasn't listening to hear. I wasn't being present. I was listening to provide a solution, right? Like you're dealing with this. And I had a teammate on my team. Her name was Lori. She came down to me. She says, Chris, like everybody knows you're smart. Everybody knows you're a great leader, right? But one of the things that we're getting is like, it's not always about you providing us a solution. Sometimes, Chris, I just want you to know that I'm being heard and I'm being listened. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And I realized that I'm like, man, Chris, I'm sacrificing connection and understanding because my default when I listen is to provide solutions, right? This is a big mindset shift that I think a lot of CFOs need to take. And here's another, listen, hear, reflect on what you've had, take the time to reflect, model out, decide, and inform, right? So when you're looking at your rolling forecast or you're evaluating your cash burn or cash runway, right? Listen to the people, hear what they're saying, right? Take some time to digest that. Then you want to model that out, then decide and inform the organization. So I think this is another piece that you can have to incorporate in your budgeting, your planning, your forecasting, all the different quantitative outputs that we have, but sprinkling in that empathy inside of that process. And then the last thing, one of the last things I just want to mention for me, and then we'll get some time for questions, is one of the most important things I've learned in building my own business and working with just a great team and helping lead is like CFOs, and you're going to hear it here first. Remember Chris Ortega said this at this conference, right? We have to start putting people before profits. I think, like seeing a lot of the different decisions that are being made, right? People are our most valuable asset, right? And I hear the skeptics that are like, Chris, they're also the most expensive, right? Like, yeah, Chris, they're the most our valuable assets. But when you look at when you look at a P&L and you look at a statement of cash flow, there's typically somewhere between 60 to 85, 90%, depending upon the business, your cash flow and expense, right? I understand that, right? But one of the most important ways to shift that mindset, if you're trying to reduce expenses, if you're trying to increase your cash runway, you're trying to reduce your cash burn, people shouldn't be the first strategy you go towards. It should be the last, right? And there's ways that you can look at optimizing your SaaS spend. You can look at negotiating key contracts. You can look at different payment terms, right? You can look at your contract management process and how can you accelerate some payments. Like there should be a checklist of strategies, tactics, and initiatives that you're looking at before you just immediately go and just say, hey, we should just get rid of like 30% of our people, when you haven't even explored all of these other elements that as the office of the CFO, what you could do. That is that mentality of putting people before profits. And I think this is a really critical legacy that CFOs have the opportunity to leave inside of the business. Okay, so where should you start? I think one of the great frameworks is it starts with you. I don't know if everybody watched this like television series, pretty crazy. I'm not like the you, like they don't start your process of being an empathetic, data-driven leader based on like the you series. That doesn't go well. But the whole goal. It starts with you, right? It starts with you as a leader. It starts with you, and it's irregardless of what title or power you have, right? Some of the best empathetic leaders that I've had, they worked on my team, right? They cared about their well-being of their teammates. They cared about other employees. They cared about their community. And I think one of the most important things that you could take away from this is it starts with you. It starts with you as a leader. It starts with you as an individual contributor, and know that your impact and your voice from an empathetic perspective matters. So that's one of the most important things that, that you have the opportunity to have is like, it starts with you, man. It starts. And I think one of the things I've learned as a leader throughout my career is that a lot of people talk the talk, but when it gets time to walk that walk, right? It's like, and anytime I've seen this as a leader, right? And I don't know about you, but anytime I've seen what somebody says and their actions don't line up, like if it's saying, hey Chris, I'm super into fitness. If I tell everybody I'm super into fitness, right? But I never work out, I never go to the gym, you never see me going to the gym, and health is important to me, but I'm eating like trash, right? I talk it, but my actions aren't lining up. That is critical. Talk the talk and be bold and confident and authentic in walking the walk. And that goes down from CFOs down all the way down to the finance organization and even across the business. That's where you start. And one final key takeaway is, I think with this new phase that we're going into, tying back to what I mentioned earlier, like we have the opportunity to leave a legacy, right? And what I'm really excited about is we've got the opportunity to write what the legacy of a CFO for the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to be. And I think a CFO that is connected inside the organization, a CFO that is comfortable and authentic and putting on that feelings officer hat, a CFO that's able to leverage technology to level up our value inside the organization, a CFO that's building connections across different functional areas, right? Like a CFO that is putting on that other chief future officer hat, right? A CFO that is, more likely to understand the business first before saying no to every single cost, opportunity, or expense that you're getting. And just know that opportunity to write that legacy, wherever you're staying in the finance organization, you have that opportunity to write it today. And we have a tremendous value that we're bringing to the business. And to me, it's time to disrupt the office of the CFO. So I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for your time. If you've enjoyed this session, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm all over on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about Fresh FP&A, check out our website, www.freshfpa.com. That's where you can find all of that. And follow us on all of our socials at Fresh FPA on all of our socials. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your insights, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for such an insightful keynote. Looks like we have time to address a couple of the questions that came through. This one question asks, how do you balance empathy with expectations? They say, I know the hybrid schedule has created give an inch, take a mile situations for many managers.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think for me, like those expectations, right, when it comes with empathy, it's meeting people where they are, right? Like one of the biggest things that I've had, like growing up in finance, right? One of the expectations I remember having was when I was working, like nobody left when the manager left, right? Like until the manager left, then that was time for you to leave, right? It was kind of just this silent expectation, but I never understood that, right? I'm like, well, if my work is done and everything is fine, like why would it be bad of leaving? So I think making sure when you're setting those expectations, it's not about commanding the team, it's being flexible, right? Because listen, like I think the remote opportunity, the hybrid schedules, like those are not going away. Talent is like, that's not going to change one day where all the talent in the world are just like, yeah, we all want to go back to the office again. So I think being flexible and looking at what those expectations are and where you have some flexibility and where you're like, hey, I could probably get a little better at this, but also being clear about, hey, you have this flexibility of your schedule, but here's the things I expect. I expect you not to miss a meeting. I expect high quality work, and I expect you to be a great business partner, and I expect you to be a sounding board to the finance organization. Now, I don't care where, how, when you do that. Those are my expectations of you as a part of the finance team. So I think being very flexible, but being also proactive in your communication around that, that definitely helps. And another thing on the hybrid thing, like it's becoming now where personal and professional lives are so much blended together now. So I think that's important to understand and meet people where they are in that approach. So that would be my advice around that one.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. And it looks like that is all the time we have for questions, but we will be sure to follow up with you with all the ones that came through. But thank you so much again for such an incredible session. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you again, Chris.
Cheers, everybody. Enjoy the conference. Thank you so much.